Hi, this is Steve Owens, and I've got Craig Veltri with me today, and I'm glad to have you here. How did you come up with the description of yourself as a country urban hybrid, and how does it reflect your musical style?
The line comes from a song that I wrote called Home Out on the Shore. And it's about this relationship that I was in that was a long distance and it was already going through some misconnections. She was living out in the Outer Banks. I was living just outside of Charlotte in the time. And that's how I described where I lived. Country urban hybrid was what Davidson, North Carolina, is where I lived at the time. It's very country, it's very rural. It's beginning to build up into a suburb. It always has been a suburb of Charlotte, but it's building up even more now. But country, and it does have some city comfort as well. The way I figured that it described my music is that I'm very into country. I'm also very much into blues to rock, alternative rock, Americana, I think is what it's become known as now. But more and more, I'm finding that I really don't fit neatly into any kind of music. So at the time, and I think it's going to be leaning more urban as my music progresses forward, I'm planning a record called Sounds Like Me, which is going to go all over the place. But the last record that I did, Letters to Defend, was a full on bluegrass acoustic country record. So I'm doing the best that I can to make sure that I am never pigeonholed into one particular genre. Quite frankly, I think genres are really unnecessary because there are only two kinds of music, good and bad.
True. What was the inspiration behind your first full length album, A Million Miles to Go?
It was a proof of concept of what at that time. I released that record in 2015, and it was really just me and acoustic guitar in my friend Maurice Grimes' garage, and we just knocked out 10 songs that I had written up to that point. And I went to Nashville with that record, and the feedback that I got at one songwriting workshop from a pretty established guy, as I recall, he said, that was a really good demo. And I'm like, okay, I sold this to people, so obviously I'm off the mark. But it was the start of something. It was me just beginning and trying to get my stuff because I'm the kind of person that it's one thing to think about it, it's one thing to have these songs written, but I'm the kind of person that needs to see it on a shelf or on Spotify. So that's where it all began.
How did working with Jack Gavin influence the production of your EP?
The Vagabond EP, he was the thing about Jack Gavin is he is the former drummer for the Charlie Daniels band. He also was the drummer for Tracy Lawrence. He has worked on several session gigs, including of all people, Peter Cetera and Tanya Tucker. He got to start with Mel McDaniel. He's been in Nashville now for almost 40 years now. And he was very good about keeping my vision on it because he was in my band too. And really, the Vagabond EP was the band that I had at the time and was the band that I was hoping to get on the road, but I've gotten my own way on that one, I'll be honest. But he had a beautiful professional in-home studio. I had a really great band. I had some really great guys that are came in and really helped me out, including my friend Jason Howard, who did backup vocals on "Shut Up, I Love You" and "Smooth Talk" and "Heartbreaker." He's going to be on my podcast this coming week. But he, I call him the professor because he not only was a adjunct professor at Lipscomb University, but he was always very open, very warm, very wise with a lot of his advice. And the thing about anything that I could do, because he's so musically eclectic, I could just tell him who the way I wanted to go with something, and he'd do it. Great guy. I'm glad to still call him a friend.
Fabulous. What's the most significant lesson you learned from your time in Nashville, and how did it shape your music?
Hmm. Number one, don't drink and sing, despite what all the songs will tell you to do. But most importantly, it taught me how to network. I went into Nashville with the ideas that I've arrived, come and get me. And after the first year, when no one was coming to get me, I realized that I had to get some work and start making some inroads. And immediately, I started making some friends, and through those friends, I started getting gigs. And through those friends, I was starting to find people who could produce and people who could play on record and people who could write. And I learned, I think anybody that is in any creative space you can learn from teaching, but you learn from each other as much as anything. So, if anything, I learned to learn from Nashville.
Fantastic. Shine On is described as a Beatle inspired. Can you talk about the Beatles' influence and your approach on the song?
The Beatles, that's like saying that I'm influenced by air because they are so ubiquitous when it comes to music and popular music past 1962, of course. That song really just came from a conversation I was having with a friend of mine. Her name was Gracie, and Gracie had a sparkle about her. She had a shine about her. And her favorite song was That Thing You Do from the movie That Thing You Do, a very 60s pop, Beatles inspired kind of song. So when I'm writing this, coming up with the riff, coming up with the lyric, it sounded Beatles to me, so I just leaned right into it. And you can't run into anybody in this business without saying they've gleaned something, whether it is inflection, whether it is lyric, whether it is sound, whether it is production technique with the Beatles. But nobody I've ever said I couldn't think of really anybody who said I've written a Beatles type song, unless of course their name is Oasis. But that's about it, all I can think of on that one. But yeah, of course the Beatles are a huge influence on me. Who isn't?
What was the process of co-writing Wandering Eyes with Abby Hankins?
Yeah. Abby's a sweetheart. She is from San Antonio, Texas, and we're sitting at her house one day, and she said to me, I really don't have any country songs. And I was puzzled that she was bringing this up to some yinzer from the suburbs of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But when she said, okay, a country song, I started playing this walk down, this kind of walking blues song that Hank Williams would do, and she had a couple of lines on that song, and knocked that we wrote 2 songs that afternoon, and within 2 hours we had those 2 songs, and that one wound up on a single.
What's your favorite DAW to work with?
I don't really have a preference as far as recording software. I use Studio One for my podcasts and stuff, but usually when it comes to full on production, and I also use that stuff for demos and stuff. But that setup, I'm not really set up to be in one place, at least for the current time frame, like the next 2 or 3 years. So I haven't really set up a home studio or done any home recording, but I do have that kind of as a work tape thing. So whatever the producer who sounds good to me and the producer is working on it, it's their software. That's a question probably better off for them. I didn't even know what a DAW was at first, but I'm open to learning all of that. But really my main goal is the performance and the song, and I'm more than happy to be in collaboration with somebody who can make that song sound better and, dare I say, marketable.
What was the experience like filming the video for Making Noise on Music Row?
It was a 2-day shoot in Nashville, Tennessee, and I worked with a really great videographer. It was about 2 years ago, and it was in the middle of November, and it was a tale of two different weather systems. Basically, it first day it was 72 degrees, it was beautiful. Then the following day, a Sunday, I walk out of the KOA cabin that I'm staying in Nashville, Tennessee, and all of a sudden it's, oh God, I died and went back to Pittsburgh. What's up with this weather? And the more overcast shots and the ones where I was a little bit, my hands were freezing and my guitar was getting warped. But it was really great. It was the first time I'd been back to Nashville since the COVID lockdowns, and thus my moving from Nashville, Tennessee as a result. And I got to go back into some places that I hadn't played in a while, got to see some friends I hadn't seen in a while, walked to the downtown area, which has blown up even more in the 2 years since I shot that music video. And I'm really looking forward to going back to Nashville first week of November to do some networking and stay there for the first quarter of 2025. Nashville, as we mentioned, gave me a lot of skills, gave me a lot of ways of moving forward in my music career, and I will always give props where props are deserved. And I will say it: I believe in love Nashville.
Fantastic. You have a podcast. Tell me about your podcast.
The podcast is the Craig Veltri interview, where Craig Veltri interviews cool people. I won't say who asked me this question after their interview, but they did ask. I'm not really sure who your audience is, and my answer to that is that anybody that I think has a very interesting life or story to tell. I've interviewed mostly musicians, but I've also interviewed sports journalists. I interviewed who also was a documentary film. I've interviewed wrestling promoters. I've interviewed an adult actress. I've interviewed several people. I've interviewed bar owners and promoters and stuff like that. So I like to think my interview style was taken a lot from two people, James Lipton and Larry King, who were very their questions weren't soft, but they were direct, and they also could interview pretty much anybody. So that's the vibe that I want to give. And the Craig Veltri interview airs every Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific, on Scarfire Radio at scarfireradio.net.
Fantastic. So, what do you got working on right now?
Right now, I am in the middle of getting ready to move away from Myrtle Beach. I took something of a residency down here since April, and I moved down here for the summer to live at the beach for a little while and make a good amount of money in a resort town. And what I'm doing right now is going back to my native Pittsburgh for a month, then heading west to California on a tour/vacation. It's mostly a vacation. Then back to Pittsburgh up until second week of January. Then back to Nashville until April 1st, and then rinse repeat as far as the summer of next year. That is, of course, fingers crossed that record deal doesn't happen for some reason.
I appreciate you being on here today, and I wish you the best of luck, and look forward to hearing new music from you.
I look forward to going into the studio for new music. That should be happening sometime in 2025. And actually, I do have a single, hopefully due out in December with my friend Lisa DeNovo. So please keep it locked on the socials.
Fantastic.